All right, everybody, welcome, one and all to Coffee, Compliance, and Chuckleheads. This is episode 12, and we are live. I am once again joined by my distinguished colleagues, Eric Rubenstein and Jordan Johnson. After a 2-week hiatus, we are back. I would say we are better than ever, but I don't want to set expectations too high. But I do want to say, we took the 2 weeks because we wanted to make sure that our buddy Jordan was back, feeling good, looking better, and ready to. Eric, hold
There's
your
no
tongue.
hope in that, guys. There's no hope.
And
you can only work with the canvas you're given, my friend.
That's right. That's right.
And so the abuse begins. So obviously, Jordan, we're grateful that you're back. Obviously it's not my place to talk about it, but this was a very serious health concern. Put a lot of scare into both Eric and myself, and I know all of your friends and your colleagues around the country and your followers on LinkedIn. We were praying for you on a daily basis, and thank goodness we got you back. And every day you'll get better and stronger and feeling better. So good to have you back, brother.
No, good to be back, man. This is where we got to be. We got a lot of progress to make, and I definitely felt the well wishes and the prayers, and it's good to have something to come back to. So thank y'all so much.
Absolutely. And Eric had an opportunity to fly out to Seattle, Washington to experience the KISS Live End of the World Tour.
Fantastic. Seeing them actually in another week in Tampa as they close out that tour. And then they head over to Las Vegas for a residency through New Year's. I actually got tickets to see them on New Year's Eve. And then David Lee Roth just announced that he is also doing a residency in Vegas, and I just got tickets to go see him on New Year's Day.
Oh, wow.
So for the CCC podcast fans, I'm a very big concert goer. Before COVID-19 in 2019, I got to see about 50 or 60 concerts around the country and around the world. Went out to Dublin for 3 days for a show. I just love it. It's what I like to do. David Lee Roth was the opening band for KISS for a few shows. And they had, as all bands do, they had a falling out. I had tickets to see David Lee Roth at a residency in Vegas, and it got shut down because of COVID. And he just announced that he's redoing it. And it was just fortuitous that I'm already going to be there for New Year's Eve for KISS. So I'll be seeing KISS on New Year's Eve and then David Lee Roth on New Year's Day. And then I'm good to die after that because I've seen what I need to see.
I grew up a huge Van Halen fan, and obviously David Lee Roth was Van Halen, in my opinion. Now, I like Sammy Hagar, but Sammy Hagar is no David Lee Roth. And
that's true.
Joe and I we were in Cabo San Lucas at Cabo Wabo, and we actually got a chance to meet him and Alice Cooper, and it was actually pretty cool. But we're huge music junkies. I'm obviously a huge country western fan. Don't say it.
That's all right. Listen, everybody can have their albatross.
Yeah.
So I am wearing a hat of this artist. His name is Mike Donnell, and you can catch him on Spotify. You can catch him at MikeDonnellmusic.com. He was nice enough to autograph the hat for me. Jill and I were down in Houston, Texas, actually just outside of Houston in Tomball, Texas. We had an opportunity to see two of our favorite artists dating back to the 90s, Doug Stone and Mark Wills. Mark Wills is enshrined in the Grand Ole Opry and is just one of the most fantastic performers. 21 years later, seeing him live, his voice was stronger. His music was even better than it was when we first found him in the 90s. And this guy, Mike Donnell, opened for both of these guys on Friday night and Saturday night. And great original music, some great covers, just a really, really talented guy. And I really hope people, if you're a country music fan, this guy is definitely somebody that you want to take a listen to. He's an up and coming star. He's a former Marine, served multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and just one heck of a great guy. So, love our music, love our coffee. Thanks to Invader Coffee for their support. So today we have a great show, and we have a lot that we want to talk about. First and foremost, the Office of Inspector General, as everybody knows, we don't rely on them any longer to release an annual work plan. We actually get the work plan every single month. And there are two releases that have come out from the Office of the Inspector General. And obviously, that's your old stomping grounds, Eric. And these were released by the Office of Audit and the Office of Investigations. I want to start by talking about the first one, because this is a little less known and understood in my opinion. There is an OIG work plan for the payers, and the payers are held accountable very much in the same way that providers and hospitals are, especially when it comes to the allocation of federal dollars that are going to the administration of Medicare Advantage programs, Medicaid programs, and the like. And one of the big issues that has been coming up, and obviously, Jordan, I want to get your take on this as well, right? Is the fact that Medicare Advantage plans are under significant scrutiny right now for what the OIG is claiming. They are increasing the risk codes, the diagnosis codes, to paint a picture of a higher level of risk of the patients that they're having to adjudicate and process claims for and do claims reviews of. But the government's saying, hold on, wait a minute. The documentation that we're actually looking at and reviewing doesn't paint that same picture. And we believe that you all are fabricating or increasing the risks, the risk scores, to be able to achieve a higher rate of reimbursement. So, Jordan, you want to grab this first and talk about it from a data standpoint, and then obviously Eric, as a former special agent for the OIG, let's talk about this, man, because this is
and the overall thing with this is frustrating to me, because the last few models that we have coming out, for radiation oncology with the ROAPM, for price transparency, it was everybody. Yet Medicare Advantage plans have been excluded from a lot of these models. Why? Medicare Advantage plans are the fastest growing set of plans and will encompass by 2025, I think they said north of 50-60% of plans. Why aren't we not including them in all of this data to be reviewed? Because now clearly the OIG says we have a problem, and we could get out ahead of this if we had a bunch of the data. Is it surprising to me? It's not. I mean, it's not the level and scale with which it occurred is surprising, but everything is going to be revolving around this risk level, risk adjust. As we move forward and these physicians start treating patients, the reimbursement is really going to be based on not only that typical E&M code, but these complexity codes of managing a patient. So it's no longer just, the one code of what the patient has. What are all the other comorbidities? What are the other influencing factors, health factors that have to be considered when taking care of the patient? And now all of a sudden, with just some quick, subtle changes in numbers, you can affect the financial outcome very, very easily. And that's frustrating to me, because there doesn't appear to be a large level of checks and balances for a program like Medicare Advantage that encompasses so much of the population and is growing so fast. And I think it'll just be the beginning if they really start to scrutinize how MA plans have been operating. Eric, I'll turn it over to you, bub.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so first, for people that don't know all of these nuances and all of the vernacular, but HCC risk scoring, the hierarchical condition category, hierarchical
Hierarchical
That's
coding
it.
conventions.
Hierarchical
Almost like he's from
category.
Mississippi. Come on.
And yeah, well, what do you know? What do you know? But that's the issue, is that for years, and I wrote a blog last week on the Advise blog about cherry picking and lemon dropping. That was the term that was used. And when I first started as an OIG agent, a lot of the discussions would be about where the fraud was, and there were these two schools of belief. One was that there was no fraud in the Part C or the Medicare Advantage world, because of these capitated payments. And, again, in the mid 90s when I started, Medicare Advantage plans were becoming a new thing. It was this evolution. It's a little bit like when Part D came about. People didn't know what the fraud was going to be until it was too late. It's a little bit like that. And I think, what you're seeing here is this kind of the press releases that are out there and the discussions out there are these collective discussions now, which is that the fraud is done on the provider side through their internal manipulation of a patient's healthcare condition. So, to me, when I see HCC, that's what I think of, healthcare condition, because you've got an auditor who sits and they get a scoring model that's done. And so if the doctor says, hey, this patient's a type 1 diabetic versus a type 2, they're sicker than they are, they have hypotension, they have, some other issue, they have a high cholesterol issue, whatever it is, then it puts them into that higher risk, and if you do that, everybody seems to forget that it's all about dollars, right? You can upcode something from a level 3 to a level 4 and it's 30 or 40 bucks. If you do it for every single patient every single day, it's almost like compounding interest, right?
That's right.
And so you get these instances where the provider is seeing all of these people everybody happens to be sick. I mean, just statistically not possible that everybody is sick, but everybody's sick. Their risk scores go up because there's an HCC that's giving them that higher adjustment. And then there's a higher capitated payment. Now you're talking about maybe it's $50, maybe it's $100, but you now bring that across the universe of the patient base, and now it becomes really large amounts of money. Now you put that on the payer side, which is now, hey, let's go in and try to figure out doing the same thing. But if you go and you do that on a scale that is inordinate to your patient member base, and you're giving them these higher scores, now you're talking about huge amounts of money. And so, the theory years ago of that there's no fraud in Medicare Advantage, I think was because early on, nobody ever looked at the payers as being the perpetuators of the manipulation. And I
Right.
think now you're seeing through these lawsuits, which are really going to be interesting to follow, because you've got people that a lot of these are key terms,
Yep.
right? So you have people who have inside original information who are going to be able to do this. And then you've also got, outside of the key terms, you've now got CMS through the Office of Audit Services and the Office of Evaluation and Inspection taking these granular looks. And I know we've collectively talked about the fact that when OEI and OAS take a look at a particular hospital, they're not so much auditing the hospital. What they're doing is auditing the hospital as it relates to CMS's implementation and monitoring of the program. And the only way to do that is to audit the end users, unfortunately.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting piece to the puzzle.
Well, there's one other piece that I want to talk about with this, because I think this is huge. And this is on the work plan. Inappropriate denial of services and payment in Medicare Advantage. And here's what the government said. Capitated payment models are based on payment per person rather than payment per service actually provided. A central concern about the capitated payment model used in Medicare Advantage is the incentive to inappropriately deny access to or reimbursement for healthcare services to increase profits for managed care plans. So, this is huge, because the OIG says that they're going to conduct medical record reviews to determine the extent to which beneficiaries and providers were denied pre-authorization or payment for medically necessary services covered by Medicare. And
Shug,
this,
just
go
bringing
ahead,
that up,
please.
that the OIG is going to do it. The piece about that's interesting is that, and because you've done a lot of the work where there's been some overpayment that's come in and OIG has come in and who's actually doing it.
Right.
The OIG as an organization doesn't have auditors on staff to do any of this work. The OIG does not employ auditors, CPCs, certified
they're all
evaluation
contracted.
there's a contract. There's a company that has a contract with OIG. The bulk of the work on that contract is actually with Office of Audit Services. There was actually just a recompete. It was an early recompete for that contract. And the existing vendor actually filed a petition and protested it. And then the RFP was pulled back. So they're the remaining vendor. But the point I'm making is, to the extent that which these audits can go on, that vendor only has so much capacity and so much budget. So what's really going to be interesting is, how is the OIG going to expand doing some of this work? I just don't have any inside information, but it'll be interesting to see how that actually is put into practice for something like this.
Yeah, I think this is going to be very interesting. And this is one of the reasons why for my family members, for my friends' family, when they become eligible for Medicare, they always ask me, what do you think about, a Medicare Advantage? I see Joe Namath on TV all the time talking about, rides to your doctors, free food, free this, free that. And I tell people all the time, I'm not a fan of anything that's free, because nothing comes for free. I believe in traditional Medicare Part B. I believe you get a supplement plan if you're worried about your long-term care because you don't have that money to cover nursing facilities beyond the first 100 days or whatever it is. Get a really good Medigap plan, secondary plan, plan I, plan J, something like that, where it gives you great coverage. But I'm a traditionalist. I push for Medicare Part B. Obviously, everybody's eligible for Medicare Part A as long as you've worked, I believe it's 14 quarters in your lifetime and you've paid your taxes to the
40.
government. 40.
40.
I said
Yep.
40. 40 quarters, excuse
10 years. Me. The equivalent of 10 years.
10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, Joe Namath may reach out to me a little bit later today and say, hey, Chucklehead, why are you throwing me under the bus, man? I got to make a living too, right? So,
listen, there's a reason they're posted up at every CVS, right, every Walgreens, and we saw this a lot in the cancer care. It's great until in some instances till you actually need it for greater services. And here they are; they think they still have their red, white, and blue Medicare card,
right?
And they don't. Right. Once you go Medicare Advantage, that card's done.
That's right. That card is done. That card is done. I will tell you, not that we want to spend a lot of time on that, but the piece of this is that a lot of people don't get is that collaterally, those TV advertisements for all that information ultimately lead to contact sheets and contact lists, which ultimately lead to them being sold ultimately to the telemarketing companies, which are then perpetuating the telemarketing / telemedicine / telehealth fraud. Absolutely. Unfortunately, that is what happens. That is absolutely what happens. And so the intent of getting these people onto a Medicare Advantage plan has the collateral effect of a perpetuation of fraud through gray market and telemarketing.
Yep. All right. So real quick, let's move just to a couple of things on the OIG work plan. Hospitals. Hospitals, be ready for this one, because the new audit of Medicare Emergency Department Evaluation and Management Services is in full gear. This sucker is kicking off. Again, remember that the government defines an emergency department as an organized hospital-based facility for providing unscheduled or episodic services to patients who present for immediate medical attention. And again, keep in mind that all evaluation and management services that are reported to Medicare are required to be adequately documented so that the medical necessity is clearly evident, and the review will determine whether Medicare payments to providers for emergency department E&M services were appropriate, medically necessary, and paid in accordance with Medicare requirements. I always remind people of subsection 30.6 of the Medicare Program Integrity Manual that says medical necessity is the overarching criteria in addition to the individual elements of a CPT code. Medical necessity is based on clinical judgment, and clinical judgment is a two-step process. And if you don't understand that, reach out to somebody who can explain it to you, because I have a feeling, and I've seen this, I can't talk about who the client is, but we actually work with and represent a huge ER group in the United States here. And let me tell you something, the number of audits that are going on with the group, the engagement by the Department of Justice and some of these other enforcement agencies that are continuously peeking around the corner to see what they're doing is it's unbelievable. So be ready for this. Two other things that I want to point out real quick, and then I want to move on. Medicare Part B payments for psychotherapy services. This is huge, right? And this is including services provided via telehealth during the public health emergency. Guys, we're still in a PHE. We're going to be in this pandemic for a while. And I'm not going to get into the whole vaccine conversation. I'm not going to get into efficacy and adverse effects and all these things. It's too politicized, and I don't even want to touch it. But here's the thing, folks. Nobody can dispute the mental damage, the issues that have been created by the mandates, the lockdowns, the requirements for masking, and all of these other things that have been going on, which has created a spike in mental health professionals being sought out. And, mental health is obviously, and I'm very partial to it, obviously, because my brother in 2003 committed suicide. So for me, I'm very passionate about, mental health and behavioral health services. But, again, this comes down to, Eric, right? Dotting the I's, crossing the T's, making certain that you have done all of the necessary to make sure that you have enough and proper documentation in the medical record to be able to support and substantiate the medical necessity behind why you rendered these services, via telehealth, and to the extent that they were rendered.
I'll jump in right before.
Yeah, please.
Here. I think the thing is, guys, look, I don't like to watch the news because it's depressing, but we have literally murder rates are at their highest in almost it's insane. We know there's some mental health issues. We know that being cooped up in a house for a long period of time probably was not a good idea. We know a lot of things. We knew that mental health, the job loss. You start looking at all these compounding factors that mental health was going to be an issue. So they opened this door up to literally be able to help people. And, Eric, you know this better than anybody, but short of, that's what they said. I've had hospitals and you guys have too, people call you, said, but it's a blanket waiver. I'm like, it doesn't mean you just throw it over everything and apply it. And so they've used this is to really push it. So if I'm in these fields, the OIG is going to hammer this stuff pretty hard. And I think they're going to dig pretty deep. The opportunity was there. And I think a lot of people probably took the bait, unfortunately. Eric, what do you think?
Please.
Yeah, I think, as we go forward, the issue is going to be that when we've got so in the public health emergency world, people were put into positions that they weren't ready to be part of. And in relaxing the rules that CMS did with respect to telemedicine and telehealth, that's obviously it's continuity of care. CMS's goal is to keep people healthy, and it's a combination of access and getting that access and, getting healthy, and also trying to remove those detriments social determinants of healthcare and the barriers, right? And so there are some that are very difficult to overcome right now, some of the socioeconomic issues involving whether or not that access and availability exists. But the point of telemental health is to try to do that. I just saw this morning an article that talked about the fact that there's some talk about doing this remote telehealth monitoring and remote health monitoring
Right.
for people who are on chronic medications, and really an expansion of the chronic care model and the like. And I think the problem that always come about is whenever an opportunity presents itself to do the right thing for the population, it is met by three people trying to do the wrong thing to capitalize on it. We see that with the telemental health. We see that with telehealth, with telemedicine. We saw it with mail order prescriptions when compounds came about, and all diabetic tests. We see it with everything. We just see it with everything. And so the problem is that we tend to jump in with both feet, opposed to treat it like an infinity pool and walk gently into it and enjoy it as we get in there. And I think that's where a lot of this is going to be. The system we have in this country has always been a pay and chase model. We will continue to be a pay and chase model until some tectonic shift comes into that. And then what collaterally I think winds up happening is that a red flag gets risen because of a fraud, waste, abuse, or compliance issue, and then we have to go in and do work on mop up from the payer side. The payers are trying to come up with predictive ways to fix problems as the methodologies are being created, and it's just it's a tough thing. I know on the emergency department stuff, we were doing some work on our end for a payer where they had an algorithm. There was an algorithm in place that was working to catch outliers. So first they were denying when there wasn't a matched professional and facility claim of the same level. So those were being denied, which I think that's appropriate because the level of service doesn't change. But they were really looking for ways, and there were discussions, and I've seen this in other articles, to create scenarios to greater deny level 4 and level 5 emergency department visits. And I don't have an inherent problem with that. I mean, a level 4 and a level 5 in the emergency department specifically talks about life or limb, death.
Right.
For every 100 people that come in, should you be seeing one level 4 or level 5 versus 100 level 4, level 5s? And so as a payer, you have to be willing to understand that if you're going to have something that's going to spit out these people as greater outliers, you've got to have an infrastructure to be able to either defend that action or refute that action against the provider, and be willing to deal with the slew of appeals. So it does work both ways on the provider and the side, but it's all about what's the best way you can get more value for your care without having to spend the greatest amount of money. I think this is the argument will always go back to price transparency, which I guess then parlays into the other discussion about the very first hospital system that is now looking to cancel contracts because they feel like they got jimmied.
Yeah. Hey, so I'll tell you what. Let's talk about that, because
that was crazy, man. That's
huge.
Yeah, it's huge because it opens Pandora's box. So Eric, roll on that, because that's actually good stuff.
Yeah. So there was an article last week or the week after where there's a health plan that's now embattled with a provider, like a hospital.
And this is in New Jersey,
it's
if
in
I'm
New
not
Jersey.
correct.
Yeah,
Forgive me for interrupting. Yeah.
Hospital-based, hospital provider facility, group, and you don't really see it. The article didn't really say this right out, but essentially what the article said is that they've been attempting to renegotiate their rates, learning that other facilities of other groups in the same geographic area were getting more, we'll call them favorable rates, but it just means they were getting paid more money.
That's right.
And so now they're saying, well, guess what? Now we're out of network. So the crazy part is this really a price transparency related shot across the bow because of that piece? And then now the secondary piece, which is as a result of this facility being out of network, patients that go to that facility who have an out of network benefit, is the payer now on the hook for actually more money than what a negotiated rate would have been if there's an out-of-network benefit and they have to pay the out-of-network benefit at a higher rate than negotiated rates. I mean, I've heard some stories of that if you're an out-of-network provider, sometimes the rates could be 110, 120, or 150
Yeah.
of whatever it is.
Significantly
So,
higher.
right. So does the plan screw themselves by not looking to negotiate a little bit of a better rate? Did the hospital have a financial windfall by doing it? Did the hospital screw itself by potentially putting patients on a little bit more of a financial hook? Like, I don't know. It's sort of confusing, but I think that the issue is is this a price transparency issue?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. And I think I also wonder how the No Surprise Bill Act
Yep.
is going to play into this, right? Because it's an out of network and they have to pay it as if they're in network. So I think there's going to be a lot of things happening here in the very near future. Prior to us taking our hiatus a couple of weeks ago, we had a long conversation about the fact that the government has granted an extension of 6 months. So from January 1st, 2022 through July of 2022, that payers now have more time to figure out if and how they're going to release their 3 machine readable files, which again, I'm bothered with this immensely. I'm not a data guru. Jordan is, but if some of these hospitals have been able to come up with their machine readable files, basically, Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about an Excel spreadsheet for the most part, right? Is that a fair statement?
Guys, if our hospitals here in Mississippi can produce the files, guys, I'm just saying and we got no excuses for anybody. But yeah, I mean, that's all it is. And again, now it's turned into this strategy to what you said. We've got this perfect storm. So we have the price transparency, our machine readable files, the No Surprise. Now we have these hospitals starting to kick back in these cases. And I think it's all going to kind of meet in this perfect storm in 2022 to where we're gonna have some level setting of healthcare. And we can't say that it's overdue, but who gets caught up in the middle of it is the patient, because the knee jerk, which isn't a good knee jerk, is let's make the patient more responsible. Well, that's literally what we've been doing for the past 3 or 4 years is more out of pocket, the max out of pockets, the deductibles, the copays, everything's been increasing towards that way of making the patients more responsible. And then the flip side is, well, continuity of care and not having to do readmission. So now let's make the providers take the risk. Well, we've done that. That's what MACRA, MIPS, and all the other stuff was for. So we've done that. At some point, it does literally turn to the payers and vendors. It turns to them to be responsible. And I think that's what we're starting to see.
Yeah. And again, I attribute, obviously, the delay that was granted to the payers. It's just, once again, proof that if you have a strong lobbying group on Capitol Hill, such as the payers and such as the pharmaceutical corporations, you're going to get what you want out of this. And, this is a problem. And again, I asked the question to both Republicans and Democrats who cry foul all the time about consumers getting shafted. Where is Elizabeth Warren, who has been, quote unquote, the champion of the people for the Consumer Protection Agency and during her time in the Senate? Again, this is not a partisan question. I'm a independent, moderate, middle of the road kind of guy. I don't really care what side of the road you sit on. But why are we pushing something back that ultimately benefits the consumer? It makes no sense. And once again, it's you, and me who are taking the brunt of the punishment on this financially, because we don't have millions of dollars that we contribute to
No, and I think, when I
campaigns.
look at healthcare systems as a previous hospital administrator, I can say this, and I'm sure we'll really make some friends here. But I think, the biggest thing is I understood financial planning, guys. It's like balancing our checkbook. It really is that simple. But as long as you're churning and making money, nobody really cared about tomorrow, right? You're making money
That's right.
today. Don't worry about tomorrow's money. So, and on a smaller scale example, we had the ROAPM, which we know is going through in January. I've received probably no less than 50 emails from healthcare systems saying, well, since we weren't selected, it's a 5-year model. Good thing we don't have to worry about it or do anything about it. I'm like, guys, how short-sighted is that? It's coming. Like, now's your time to get stuff in order. But I think that's where we're at, is we're threading the needle here. And these guys, the hospital administrators, whether they've been there 18 years or 3 years, they're concerned about, the next quarter. They're not thinking 2 or 3 quarters.
They're not thinking long term. And,
and that's
and just
scary.
just like you, Jordan, I was a hospital administrator as well. And, budgeting and, making sure that we were strategically prepared for the next year in quarter one or quarter two of the current fiscal year was so critical, to being able to make sure that, we could sustain our staff, making sure that new technology that we needed for the hospital was available, making sure that outreach programs were being provided, making sure that we were well positioned to be able to sustain in the event we had a downturn for whatever reason. And I think you're right. There's a lot of short-sightedness. Now, there's a lot of great administrators out there, and I know, obviously, we're speaking in very general terms. There's a lot of great administrators out there at hospitals who, want to make sure that they are prepared for what's coming down the pike, and they're looking at a 6-month, 12-month, 18-month, 24-month down the road strategy to make sure that things continue to move in the right direction. But anyways,
Well, and I'll
go ahead,
tell
please,
you,
Eric.
our payer clients that where we do some work facility side are already saying to us, hey, we need to start gearing up your staff to do some increased reviews on the DRG stuff because we know that these audits are on the way. The good thing is that they're actually the payers are gearing up to start doing the audits. But what we're also hearing from hospital administrators that we know is that they are preparing to be the recipients of those audits. So, we get that the payers are going to be doing those audits because they should be. I mean, they should be. During the public health emergency and all the things relative to that, the vault was open and people were just going in with black canvas bags and helping themselves to all of the money. I get that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that the providers who are out there rendering the services shouldn't be trying to bulletproof themselves. And I was on a call this morning with a payer where it was with their payment integrity group, and I said, look, from an auditing OIG perspective, we look at things fraud, waste, abuse are all looked at the same, meaning that we look at a chart gets reviewed, the audit results are the audit results. And whether you are going to handle it as a fraud or a waste, abuse, error, compliance is going to be based upon what the pattern that provider has done long term, but also what the focus is going to be. Your output is the same. It's what you do with the information that's provided in that output. So I applaud the payer community for making sure that they're capping costs by, if you've got sepsis, you should have been in the hospital with a DRG of sepsis. You shouldn't have been in the DRG for COVID if you didn't have COVID. If you had a UTI, you should be in the hospital for a UTI, not sepsis. You're not entitled to that money.
That's right.
And from the provider side, you've got to bulletproof those things and stay with those 7. Well, I think we'll start calling it 7A because it's the 7 points, right? The model compliance, and then your take on it, which is risk mitigation. Which I say to people, if you took all 7 pieces together, you've got risk mitigation, like
Sure.
what's going on and how do you stop that? And I think that that's what has to happen. I mean, everybody's always talking about the payer community is crap, the provider community is crap. The fact of the matter is that there's always going to be the arguments, right, that exist. But if you've come up with this sort of symbiotic plan, which gets back to the work plan, the work plan is to let people know what's going to happen. You don't know about investigations because the Office of Investigations isn't sharing that, but you know that when the Office of Audit Services or the OIG comes out with a new work plan, as a provider, you should be waking up and saying, "Hey, maybe we need to start looking at our E&M level 5s or our diagnostic tests." If you're a facility, same thing. If you're a payer, you're absolutely doing it. The payers are going to the work plan and saying, if OIG thinks this is important, we think it's important.
Absolutely. I think those are all great key points. All right. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and obviously, Eric, then I want to move into the law enforcement. The last thing that I wanted to talk about very quickly from the OIG work plan was for all providers. And there's a huge push to look at the accuracy of place of service codes on claims for Medicare Part B physicians when the beneficiaries are inpatients under Medicare Part A. So there's a big push on that right now. Make sure you have the right place of service documented on the claim. Make sure that you are, making your staff aware. If you're a physician listening to the podcast today, make sure that you're advising your staff to make sure that the place of service for any hospital services you're rendering, especially when the patient is status inpatient, are being billed with the right place of service. And then audit of Medicare payments for spinal pain management services. Pain management docs, man, you guys are the new punching bags. You're going to be on this OIG list for quite some time. It behooves you to make sure that you understand what the government is looking at, what the commercial payers are looking at, making sure that your documentation is complete, accurate, and well defined from a medically necessary and reasonable and appropriate standpoint to be able to withstand the scrutiny that your claims are going to be put under. So be prepared for that. Oh, and there was one other thing. Eric, and we kind of had a really moment this morning. The OIG has come out and said Medicare needs better controls to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse related to orthotic braces. Really?
It's so sometimes when you see these revelations, so I was hired by the OIG in February of 1997. One of my first cases as a new agent involved DME fraud and kickbacks involving, among other things, orthotics, shoe inserts.
Mm-hmm.
The shoe inserts that were being provided, which ultimately was an area that became a strike force area in Brooklyn and New York. But the people were getting essentially a Dr. Scholl's insert. At the time, you couldn't tell if you were a 100, a 200, a 300, or 400. You got to step on that machine.
Yeah, you got to go to CVS and step on that little thing to get your pressure points. Yeah.
But, these were like actual off-the-shelf orthotics that you cut and trimmed to size for your shoe. They were being billed out to the program back then, were still hundreds of dollars. They weren't custom molded inserts. And so, it gets a little back to the podcast I do for Advise, the retro fraud, is that none of this ever changes. I mean, when Medicare has set a fee schedule to pay $400 and $500 or whatever the amount is for a shoe insert and call it a custom molded shoe insert, and you're getting a Dr. Scholl's shoe insert. I remember going early on in my career to do interviews of Medicare beneficiaries. These are all culturally based cases. We would go into an area in Brooklyn where the patients were of Eastern European descent. They were all very elderly people. They were known as M the letter M as in Mary beneficiaries, which meant that they were getting Medicare but hadn't paid into the 40 quarters to get Medicare. So these are people that were getting health care that they probably didn't get when they were in their home country in Eastern European bloc countries. And, we would show up and we would say, what did you get? And they would open up a closet and there'd be ace bandages and there would be splints and there would be, just garbage, just absolutely garbage. And we would say, well, how did you go when you get it? And they'd say, well, some nice boy came to me and he offered to get me this, in return for my Medicare number. And then they would give me these gifts. And I think I might have given this as an example previously, but I would say, well, what they give you as a gift? Now I'm all intrigued.
Right.
And they said, I got a TV. I go, well, let's see it. Why not? We're here. And, we didn't have cell phone cameras at the time, so you couldn't get pictures right then and there. But, these people would take you into a room and you would expect that you're going to get, this is 1997, you're going to see this big 32-inch Sony, tube TV that these boys brought them. And it's like it would be a black and white 12-inch TV that you would see in your house as a kid on the kitchen counter
with the crank side.
Oh, well, close to it. With they would call it an old school. My old school Italian family would call it tin foil on the rabbit it's aluminum foil. They call it tin foil on the rabbit ears. And they would be talking about this, and it was like the greatest thing. And you realize, as you Southern folks like to say, God bless his heart, you would see these people very excited to have it because they didn't have these kinds of things. And so here's this clearly it was purchased secondhand. It wasn't even brand new. Obviously, it was channels 2 through 13.
Yeah.
Some piece of crap TV. And these people were like, yeah, I'll take that TV. Sure. Use my Medicare number. And then, they're ratcheting it up. So when I see the OIG putting out this, this kind of thing, it's good that they're reiterating these things because it always has to be reiterated. But, it's almost like every week on social media, you see something that comes out from the OIG, a warning about not sharing your information and not being a victim. But the problem is that the number of people that these ads touch are limited in scope because the technology of the Medicare population today is going to be better by the population tomorrow. We just got my mother, we won't call it an iPhone, but a smartphone. And, it's been a bit of a debacle from the flip phone. So how is my mother getting an OIG alert on not sharing her personal information? So, when you see these things from the OIG, I go, great, you're doing this. You're reiterating something that's out there. But, what else is going on? People that are committing fraud don't care about what the OIG has to say. Let's just get that out there. If you're just out there committing fraud, criminal fraud, and you don't care what the OIG thinks, putting out something that says that the OIG is taking a harder look at orthotics or DME, they already know it because that's where the money is.
That's right. So I do have to correct you on one small thing, Eric.
I knew it was coming.
You do. So us Southerners, we actually just say, bless their heart.
Not God bless their heart.
Yeah.
Is it because it's implied that if you're a Southerner, you believe in God and God bless your heart?
There you go, man.
I understand.
Bless you, it's the best insult ever.
Well, without making this religious and about my religious convictions, I figured I would throw that in just to be like, hey, look, this
I thought it was a well placed.
It was timely. It was well placed. We're
several
good,
times
man.
over the past 2 weeks.
I just have to know. I just have to know. Living when I'm down here in Florida, I just have to know. To add to remove that piece from the
no. In Florida, I think you're okay because you're all transplants there anyway. So I think it's all right for you to be able to say God bless your heart.
Okay.
And I'm on the cusp being in Orlando, and I have actually been told that the more north I go in Florida, the more south I go.
Correct.
That is true.
So So using certain phrases in northern or western Florida I'm gonna have to really just get my dictionary going on this.
Yeah, once you get to Ocala and above, you're starting to enter into the South. That's like that.
You guys on
that's like that band Florida Georgia Line.
Yeah.
So
it's a good thing I have the two of you guys are in the Seinfeld world. You're close to 1 and 2 on my speed dial list. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you get that.
Yes.
And so as the result of that, what I could do is before I walk in to the place I'm going, I could just say, hey, quickly, what are the 3 or 4 things that are absolutely needed that I need to say? And if I say it like this,
We
am
got
I
you.
leaving the place or am I not leaving the place?
That's
So,
right. And it's like when we come up to the Northeast, it's, hey,
Listen,
how
I've
you
got to go.
doing, huh?
Yeah,
So,
listen, Eric, in New York, I'm doing the Association of Value-Based Cancer Care, a panel with Scott Gottlieb, Seema Burma, several people in 2 weeks. I'm
it's
going
a
to be
great panel.
I'm going to be a fish out of water. I don't know what to say. So again,
well,
I'm going to need that speed
I
done.
may be up there, and what I can do is
Just translate.
similar to the requirement that you see with the
Earpiece.
508 compliance that you see, right, for people that are impaired. What you may need is you may need someone to translate. I say when I do presentations some places, I will say, listen, I'm a New Yorker. Sometimes the accent kicks out a little bit more. I ask for other New Yorkers to raise their hands, and I say, could you guys just scatter yourselves so that you can sit and be, translators? What I would tell you is your good thing is if you go to one of the outer boroughs other than Manhattan, if you do see a couple of guys getting ready to fight, the way that you'll know that the fight is not going to happen for a while is the first 20 minutes of the fight is the guys will be going back saying to each other, do you have any idea who I am? Do you know who I am? Do you know who you're talking to? That'll go on for about 15 or 20 minutes. That'll give you enough time to get out of there. So then,
I like it.
it's sort
All
of like
right.
the way a light the lights in New York are yellow for about 10 minutes. So,
all right. So listen, we're going to save that for our skit at the comedy club that's coming up this weekend. So let's move off of Vinny Barbarino and Bubba John for just a minute, and let's move into Eric. I want to talk about, in the last 9 minutes that we have, I want to talk about the biggest law enforcement effort that you were starting to talk about with us prior to kicking off the show. And then I want to wrap up our show, obviously, with awarding the Chucklehead of the Week award.
So, when they do these big operations, the one thing that you can see that comes out of these big operations that's really pretty spectacular is that it really is the bringing together of compliance failures, law enforcement, and data analytics together. These large roundups that are typically done by the OIG as part of strike force and non-strike force related districts really do take the data, bring in like where are the compliance failures, but really where are those compliance failures from a fraud perspective, and then bring it all together. This particular operation, 138 individuals were arrested over a few weeks period. The strike force and DOJ and OIG in connection with each other, with its law enforcement partners, have gotten away over the past couple of roundups, it appears, from doing these over 1 or 2 or 3 day periods. Very, very difficult to logistically do that. I can tell you from having been part of them, they are monstrous. And so they do them over coordinated efforts over periods of time. 138 defendants, over $1 billion in losses. And of the 138, 42 were healthcare providers. I think the thing that people get shocked about is that the number of healthcare providers isn't bigger. What I say is that people need to also understand that the healthcare continuum in the government space and the commercial space, it's not just people who have a designation after their name of MD or DO or PharmD or whatever. There's a lot of this business-based practice of medicine. Laboratory owners do not need to be medical doctors. Your ancillary service providers like DME and the like do not need to be medical doctors. The owners of certain types of businesses that can build the system do not necessarily have to be healthcare providers. So seeing these non-healthcare providers getting picked up, really is a showing that the thrust is moving forward. If again you read this press release, so the Appalachian task force or strike force was rolled in for opioids. Opioids, unfortunately, took a back seat during the PHE. It's clear from this, it's kicking up now. And the fact that they're trying to ascribe liability now to pharmacists for dispensing, as well as the doctors for the writing. So this is just showing this broader view of where the government is going on these, in conjunction with obviously continued stuff on telemedicine, telehealth, telemarketing, all of that stuff, the greater expansion of these investigations. And then obviously now the COVID related stuff is starting to come out more and more when you've got so much money being spent on COVID, and the interaction of all of the organizations that are involved with the COVID-19 relief money from both the healthcare provider side and the Paycheck Protection Program side.
Yep.
I mean, it's, this is just going to keep going. Organizations like the PRAC, the Pandemic Response Accountability Commission, which is a consortium of OIGs together, they got something like $50 million that was given to them for investigations. There are contracts that are out there where there's data analytics going on to mine this. There are agents working this. It's going to keep happening. I'm being interviewed in a couple of weeks by a magazine. I know you're doing something similar, Sean, where I'm going to be talking to a writer from a magazine about telemedicine and telehealth, and essentially what I've been calling it, which is neither one of those.
That's right.
And how it's a misnomer to call it that, and how the prevalence of telemental health, telehealth, and telemedicine is an important integral part of the care continuum, and removing some of those barriers to care. But it is unfortunately coming at a huge financial risk to the payer world.
Absolutely, it is. And I just got to give a shout out to Jeffrey Smith. Nailed it.
Yes.
All right. So before we get to the Chucklehead of the week, do you want to talk about the thing that really irked us the most today about expert witnesses? We've got 4 minutes. Do you think we could blow it up in like 2 minutes?
Yes.
Probably not, but we can at least
We can give it out.
We can at least torque up. We can at least torque up enough people about it. But yeah, and honestly, Sean, this is you and Jordan are the resident experts in a lot of things we talk about. And I always say, Sean, that you would have been a great OIG agent because you really do understand the landscape well and quote the policy stuff. And I know you've been an expert on many things and have been in court more than most people and understand that landscape. But yeah, we're working on some stuff together from an expert perspective. And, it really amazes me sometimes.
Let me just start off by saying this. One, if you're going to hold yourself out to be a subject matter expert and you're going to testify in a significant False Claims Act case or a healthcare fraud statute case, you better darn well know what you're talking about. You better not be just simply regurgitating and shoving fluff into a report to be able to justify charging $250,000 for that report. That's what I refer to as a hired gun. And that's somebody who's being hired to say whatever it is that the attorneys want them or need them to say to be able to get the government to pick up the case and carry the torch forward on their behalf. Second, if you're going to be an expert and you're going to submit a report, check your report for sentence structure, for grammatical mistakes, for spelling mistakes, and things that should be caught before you ever submit that. And three, if you're going to cite other people's work, make sure that you do it, and I'm talking about statistical analysis. Make sure that you are actually understanding what those statisticians or those PhD, economists are actually talking about. Because if not, and I mean this sincerely, you're going to run into at some point people like Jordan Johnson, Eric Rubenstein, and myself, who take great pleasure in making sure that a judge and or a jury, if that case makes it that far, understand what type of nonsense has been produced. I can't stress this enough.
No, I think that sums it up. And unfortunately, this is the kind of stuff that increases cost for everybody. And it's disgusting. Right. And this is the kind of stuff that Eric, myself, and Sean will go out of our way to make sure gets spotlighted and corrected. It's really a disgusting trend.
It's
and for no other reason than for somebody to make money. That's it.
That's right. All right, Eric, you get the honors this week in the last minute that we have. Award the Chucklehead of the week.
Oh, my chucklehead of the week is going to be, and I blogged about this the end of last week. My chucklehead for this week is going to be the pharmacist who was giving the Pfizer vaccination to children under the approved age of 12. I understand that the vaccination is being presented. The FDA is getting that package from the FDA. The FDA will make a quick turnaround to provide that EUA, and then ultimately, which will be that final. And this isn't, again, this is not political. If you get the shot, you get the shot. You don't get the shot, you don't get. I got the shot. My parents just got their third vaccination the other day. My father's 80 years old, has a lot of health conditions. My mother's got some. I get that 99% of the people recover. 1% don't do so well, and there's the long haulers, all of that. I don't know if I was in the 99% of the 1%, and that's it. And I was willing to take my shot on getting the vaccination. But to give, I almost equated giving the vaccination to people, to these kids, as an off-label use. It's one thing when a doctor is looking to do off-label and theoretically looking to do it based upon clinically appropriate information that's out there and things like the compendium, if you're familiar with it, and some of these other off-label uses. I mean, obviously there is a big issue with hydrochloroquine being used and the what was the other one, the ivectin being used, and people like Joe Rogan. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I love Joe Rogan, but man, you don't realize that when you say these things, people in the public world listen. And this pharmacist giving this shot, so outside of scope of practice, right? So it's a licensure issue. It's obviously a financial reimbursement issue, but it's like, man, this is really almost in the same vein to me as the pharmacist a few weeks ago that we talked about, who was stealing the cards and selling them online for $10. Like, what are you thinking? Now, what we don't know from this press release about it was this pharmacist doing it within the culture? Obviously she was trying to do the right thing, and I get that, but man, you're creating an environment, and I get it. If tomorrow this drug is given emergency authorization and then ultimately gets its full approval, is this a moot point? Well, the people were safe. Yeah, maybe. But what if something wacky were to come up and the FDA says, no, let's hold off, let's see. You got
a big problem on your hands.
Yeah, and just from not even a healthcare fraud perspective, this is like a chucklehead of humanity approach. Like, when you woke up today, did you think that doing that was a smart thing? You always have Robert Frost, the road less taken. Just stand there for another couple of days. I mean, I all get it. It's terrible. We all have friends who have kids. Schools are going remote. We've got instances of, breakouts of COVID and all of that. Again, I get all of that. It's all stuff that will continue to divide us as a country for the rest of our lifetime. It is a social experiment that has gone awry, clearly. Masks, no masks, open up, don't open up. I get all of that. But really, when you're talking about this from a health perspective, a pharmacist has an immediate duty to just act within the scope of their licensure. Giving an injection, that would be like me coming in and saying, I don't need a flu injection, but can you give me one for this rash I have?
Yeah.
Or I think I'm going to get a rash, or it's got to be within that scope. I mean, just like a pharmacist can't dispense a prescription for something else, you can go in and say, hey, I think I have a sinus infection. Here are my symptoms. And the pharmacist will go, woo, sounds like you have a sinus infection. You know what? Go take that Sudafed and come back to me when you've got a prescription from your doctor. In this country, we're not dispensing pharmacists have a limited ability to dispense things. And I think that just makes this person a chucklehead for a lot of reasons.
I agree. So great job. All right, guys, listen, this is taking us right to our hour for our podcast today. I do want to point out that in honor of our very good friend, Matt Lahan, I wore a V-neck today.
Very proud.
And I'm so surprised Eric didn't pick up on that. So I'm grateful that I was able to get away with it for now.
I did. I did, but you're wearing a robe cardigan, minus an ascot. Yeah, cardigan minus.
I dressed up today, man. The only
thing you're missing is your ascot. When when we have Matt on, when I've spoken to Matt's basically wearing the gentleman's wife beater.
With that said, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of Coffee Compliance and Chuckleheads. This is episode 12. On behalf of my distinguished colleagues, Jordan Johnson and Eric Rubenstein. I'm Sean Weiss. I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. As always, be good to yourself, but more importantly, be good to each other. And until next time, we'll try harder. See you next week.